At one point, the subject of today's video was a 5-star recruit, an All-American, and was the #1 wide receiver prospect for the 2023 NFL Draft. We're talking about Kayshon Boutte. He had an historic start for LSU and looked like he could be even better than Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson. Unfortunately, after a really hot start at LSU, Boutte would slowly flame out in Baton Rouge and went from a guy who was a first-round lock to now falling to the 6th round and becoming one of the biggest what-ifs in college football in recent memory. Today, I want to talk about why the heck Kayshon Boutte fell off. How did he go from a consensus top 10 pick to that 6th round player? We're going to go through his journey, talk about his LSU story, and then 3 reasons why I think his stock fell. But before we get started, be sure to leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you are new to the channel, turn on post notifications so you never miss when I upload, and let me know what player I should cover next from the 2023 NFL Draft. Now, let's go ahead and get started and talk about the sad rise and fall of Kayshon Boutte. But in order to understand why his draft stock has fallen, we need to go back in time. Growing up in Louisiana, Boutte was special from a young age. His older cousin said, quote, he was one of those kids that was a Pee Wee League superstar. He could do everything and was electrifying at what he did and was a standout player in junior high school. He was a man amongst boys he was playing against and just dominated on both sides of the ball. Kayshon grew up in a nice part of a somewhat rough city known as New Iberia, Louisiana, and his father promised himself he would give his family a father, a mother, a stable family, and a good faith life, something he personally didn't have growing up. Surely this was extremely beneficial for Kayshon, and the Boutte family knew they had a special talent on their hands when Kayshon would chase the family dog around the yard as if it was a drill, and he was quick. He became known as an elite runner as a kid, and when he arrived at Westgate High School, he had a ton of hype surrounding his name. For a while, he was just known as a track star, but eventually he would take football more seriously and would start to blow up as a sophomore. At 16 years old, he got offers from schools such as Kansas, Tennessee, and West Virginia, with plenty more to come soon. This was due in large part to them hiring former Tulane wide receiver Devin Boutte, no relation, and because of that, he became a top 50 player, was attending camps all around the country, and was matched up with top recruits such as Derek Stingley Jr. He was going to be attending LSU camps, and the Tiger staff was definitely interested in him, but they were still holding off on an offer, but Boutte was upfront about that being the one. He said, quote, LSU is the main one I want. So, all the other offers are alright, but when LSU comes, that's where I want to be. Obviously, Boutte made it clear where he wanted to go, and at the time, he was a blue-chip player, was meeting with Olympian runners, and was more importantly, providing hope for the city of New Iberia. One coach said, quote, this is a tough area. Not too many people make it out, and our kids know that. As coaches, we push that narrative. A lot of our kids maybe come from low-income areas, so their talents are going to pay for their school. We try to do our best. So, where was he going to end up going? Well, ever since he was in 8th grade, he wanted to be an LSU Tiger, and that is what he ended up doing. He said, quote, I knew LSU was the best place for me towards the beginning. I always knew that's where I wanted to go and where I belonged. It feels good to be a Tiger, knowing I accomplished a great goal. He not only hit that collegiate goal, but he also hit his on-the-field goals. As a senior, he caught 47 passes for 1,005 yards and 15 touchdowns. He was also a running back, and he ran the ball 71 times for 874 yards and 12 scores. Add in the fact that he was also a track star, and this guy was going to be a difference maker in college. For a while, it did look like Boutte was a complete lock to LSU, but towards the end of his recruitment, Alabama began to creep in. He said, quote, I was considering Alabama at one point in time. I know when they first offered me, I said I would never consider them, but it just boiled down to looking at things, and it kind of changed my mind a bit on them. Based on what I've read, it seems that Bama really threw the kitchen sink at him, but he did not waver. Eventually, he would reaffirm his commitment to LSU, and this was a huge get for Coach Orgeron. He was the #1 recruit in the state of Louisiana, and after he dominated the Under Armour All-American game, he was looking to earn his 5th star. He said, quote, I feel like I should be a 5-star, but I'll never be satisfied. I'll always grind like I have 0 stars. As we've already said, Boutte had insane speed, as he was actually 5th in the country in the 200-meter dash, and in the 100-meter dash, he ran a 10.97. The dude was electric. Combining everything, he would eventually get his 5th star, as according to 24/7 Sports, he was listed as a 5-star recruit, the #2 receiver, and the 24th best player in the class of 2020. With LSU producing so much wide receiver talent in recent memory, how was Boutte going to do? Going into the 2020 season, LSU was fresh off a national championship with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and Justin Jefferson. They were huge shoes to fill, as the Tigers would need to find a new quarterback, and more importantly, 2 more wide receivers to step up. Boutte was going to be looked upon to do that, but not at first. LSU ended up starting Miles Brennan at quarterback, and the 2020 season was very interesting. Boutte caught one pass in their upset loss to Mississippi State before he would start to go off in Week 3. This was his breakout game against Missouri, as in a close loss to the Tigers, he caught 5 passes for 49 yards. He catch his first career touchdown in a road loss to Auburn, and then went over the century mark for the first time against Alabama. Against the number 1 ranked Crimson Tide, he caught 8 passes for 111 yards. This was insane, as they now had TJ Finley and Max Johnson throwing him the ball. The following weekend against Florida, he once again put his name out there, as he catch 5 passes for 108 yards and a touchdown, as they would go and upset number 6 Florida in the Swamp. This was a huge game, but it was nowhere near the best game of his season. The following weekend against Ole Miss, Boutte made history. He caught 14 passes for 308 yards and 3 touchdowns in a 53-48 victory over Ole Miss. This would really put Boutte into the national spotlight. He made SEC history and was now establishing himself as arguably the best freshman receiver in college football. I mean, who could really argue with that one? He finished his freshman season with 45 catches for 735 yards and 5 touchdowns. Going into 2021, Boutte had an insane amount of hype, and he would live up to it. In Week 1, LSU would have to go on the road to play against UCLA, and at this time, Max Johnson was the starter. In that first game, he caught a career-high 9 passes for 148 yards and 3 touchdowns in a loss to the Bruins. While this was an unfortunate loss, Boutte was going to go on a mission. In Week 2, he catch 2 touchdowns in a win over McNeese State, and then had another touchdown in a win over Central Michigan in Week 3. After that, they go on the road to play against Mississippi State, and in what was a close victory, he catch 4 passes for 85 yards and 2 touchdowns. The guy was off to a historic pace, and he was definitely going to be the frontrunner for the Biletnikoff Award. Things would get even better against Auburn, as in that game, he catch 6 passes for 127 yards and a touchdown, and then he catch 8 passes against Kentucky. Unfortunately, LSU would lose both of those games, and they would also lose Boutte for the remainder of the season. He ended up hurting his ankle against Kentucky and would end up missing the remainder of the season. This was definitely a tough break, and there were some rumors about him just deciding to sit out, but I'm not really going to speculate, and either way, this was a big blow. LSU had a miracle situation against Texas A&M to get to a bowl game before they would eventually get boat raced by Kansas State. It didn't really help that LSU was missing a ton of good players, and they had a receiver playing quarterback, but at least they got to a bowl game, I guess. Boutte would finish his sophomore season with 38 catches for 509 yards and 9 touchdowns. This all happened in only 5.5 games, and if he would have continued at that pace, he would have had a historic season for LSU, would have been a first-team All-SEC player, and could have had a chance at winning the Biletnikoff. Unfortunately, that's not what would happen, but draft experts and scouts were ready for this guy to get to the NFL. He was a consensus top receiver. Guys such as Quentin Johnston, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Jordan Addison, Josh Towns, and Boutte were routinely ranked as the top 5 receivers, and with Brian Kelly coming in, many really thought that Boutte was going to have an insane season. Unfortunately, 2022 did not go as planned. In their first game against Florida State, he only caught 2 passes for 20 yards, and they lost by way of getting their extra point block. At the time, there was a lot of speculation about Boutte, as he apparently wiped LSU clean from his social media, but he did return. He caught 5 passes the following week against Southern, and then went MIA against both Mississippi State and Auburn. Luckily, LSU had other guys step up, but he would finally catch his first touchdown of the season in a loss to number 8 Tennessee. After that, he'd go for over 100 yards in a win over Florida, and then would struggle in 3 of his next 4 games. He did catch 7 passes in an overtime victory over Alabama, but he really became more of a role player and was not producing the same way he used to. LSU went on that run and ended up going to the SEC championship game, where Boutte had the best game of his season. Against number 1 Georgia, he caught 6 passes for 107 yards and a touchdown, as LSU lost by 20. That would end up being the final game of Boutte's career, as he declared for the 2023 NFL Draft. He finished his junior season with 48 catches for 538 yards and 2 touchdowns. Those numbers were not great. Because of his immense potential and his past, there was a good chance that Boutte could get drafted early. Some still thought of him as a 2nd or 3rd round pick, and he was one of those guys that could easily develop into an NFL superstar. Unfortunately, though, things would not go according to plan for Boutte. He ended up falling all the way to the 6th round, where he was taken with the 187th overall pick by the New England Patriots. Honestly, that's a pretty good landing spot for him. I think he has a chance to make the end of the roster, but I think the question you're all asking is, why on earth did he fall this far? Well, in my opinion, there are 3 reasons. 1, his physical attributes. He apparently had a really bad NFL combine, looked out of gas and looked out of shape, and then when it came to his LSU Pro Day, he wasn't much better. Even though those are only short events, they make a lasting impression on scouts. 2, there was the rumors. I'm not going to dive into it because I have no idea if it's true, and I would not want to gossip and hurt his reputation, but there were some rumors swirling about the SEC championship and something involving Boutte, and if you want to look that up on your own initiative, you can, but that would maybe make some people worry about his character, and if he was head-to-head with another player, you're going to choose the other guy. Finally, it was just plain and simple as numbers. After a historic start, Boutte just fell off. That injury destroyed his sophomore season, and this year he just did not have good stats. It's not like LSU was that bad either, as Jure Jenkins did perfectly fine, but Boutte just couldn't get it together, did not have good stats, and seemingly just wasn't the best option to help LSU's offense succeed. It's really unfortunate for Boutte because he was one of my favorite players, and it is sad when a player's stock falls like this, but I still think he has a good chance of making the Patriots roster, and with all his potential, he could end up being a long-term NFL player, and it could be worth the risk for the Patriots. But what do you guys think? If you're an LSU fan, what do you think went wrong for Boutte? How do you think he'll do in the NFL? And what's another player I could take a look at next? Be sure to let me know down below. Leave a like if you want to support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.